Chinelo had always been the kind of woman who believed in the sanctity of marriage. Raised in a humble home where her parents constantly preached forgiveness, she carried that principle into her own relationship with Ken, her husband. At first, their marriage seemed like a fairy tale. Ken was charming, handsome, and financially stable. Friends often envied Chinelo, believing she had married the man every woman prayed for. But what no one knew was that behind closed doors, Ken's true character often surfaced, a man whose arrogance and temper would leave scars on her heart. It started with small things, disrespectful words thrown carelessly during arguments, late nights he excused with business meetings, and the smell of perfume that was not hers lingering on his shirts. Chinelo noticed, but each time she confronted him, Ken dismissed her as being paranoid. "You worry too much, woman," he would say, sometimes slamming doors behind him. And yet, when he came back with apologies and sweet words, Chinelo's heart softened. She convinced herself that all men had flaws and that patience was a wife's duty. Still, deep within her, she carried an unspoken ache. Her friends often asked if she was happy, and she would smile to cover her pain. Forgiveness became her second nature, though each act of forgiveness chipped away at her self-worth. Chinelo's love blinded her to the truth that her sacrifices were slowly destroying her. But she told herself, for the sake of peace, for the sake of the children I hope to have, I will endure. What she didn't know was that her endurance would one day be tested in a way she could never have imagined. The neighborhood always saw Ken as a model husband. He drove Chinelo to church on Sundays, gave big offerings, and sometimes dropped his wife off at her women's fellowship. To outsiders, he was caring and responsible. But Chinelo lived with the cracks that no one else could see. The man who smiled in public was often a storm in private. One evening, after she had prepared his favorite egusi soup, Ken came home smelling of alcohol. He barely touched the food, instead snapping at her about how she never did anything right. Chinelo swallowed her tears and tried to calm him, but his rude words pierced deeper than any slap could. When she asked why he was always returning late, he scoffed, "Do you feed me? Do you pay the bills? Stop questioning me like I'm your child." The silence that followed was suffocating. That night, Chinelo lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She remembered her vows, for better, for worse, and whispered a prayer for her marriage. She told herself that every union had its storms and that God expected her to endure. Yet deep inside, fear crept into her heart. What if Ken never changed? What if this was only the beginning of something darker? It was on a rainy Friday evening when the whispers became reality. Chinelo had gone to the market when a close friend pulled her aside. "Sister, I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw Ken with another woman yesterday. They were at a restaurant, holding hands like lovers." At first, Chinelo's heart refused to accept it. She laughed nervously, insisting it must be a mistake. But when she returned home, she noticed a strange necklace in their bedroom drawer, clearly not hers. Her hands trembled as she held it. When Ken came in, instead of apologizing, he shouted, "Why are you snooping through my things? You think you're perfect?" His anger drowned out her questions. That night, instead of sleeping, she wept silently into her pillow. But by morning, she found herself doing what she always did, praying, forgiving, convincing herself that love was stronger than betrayal. She told herself that women were called to endure, but she did not realize that each act of forgiveness was giving Ken more permission to break her heart. Chinelo learned to master the art of silence. When Ken's phone rang late at night, she pretended not to notice. When his cologne carried scents she didn't buy, she ignored it. She chose peace over confrontation, but peace had turned her into a prisoner of her own silence. Her mother often called to check on her. "My daughter, how is marriage treating you?" And Chinelo always replied, "It is well, Mama. God is in control." She never told anyone the truth, not even her siblings, because she didn't want to bring shame to her family. But her heart carried bruises invisible to the world. At church, she sat beside her husband, holding hands and smiling, while deep inside, she felt empty. She wanted love, attention, kindness, but instead she got rude remarks and late-night absences. Her only comfort was the thought that one day, he would realize her worth. Little did she know, Kim was sinking deeper into his own selfish desires, and the unbelievable was slowly drawing near. One evening, the storm finally broke. Chinelo had cooked a lavish meal and waited for her husband to return. Hours passed. Midnight came. Just as she was about to clear the table, Kim stumbled in, reeking of alcohol, his shirt stained with lipstick. She froze. The evidence was undeniable. Kim, her voice shook, where have you been? Look at yourself. Instead of remorse, he laughed cruelly. So what if I was with another woman? Do you think you're the only woman in the world? I married you, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to others. Her legs felt weak, her heart shattering with every word. Tears streamed down her face, but Kim brushed past her and went to bed as if nothing had happened. Alone in the living room, Chinelo collapsed to her knees. For the first time, she wondered if love was worth this pain. Yet even in her brokenness, she whispered, God, give me strength. Maybe tomorrow will be better. The next morning, Chinelo woke up with swollen eyes from the night's tears. She expected silence from Kim, but instead, he walked into the kitchen with a casual tone. About last night, don't take it too seriously. Men make mistakes. You should be used to me by now. Chinelo stared at him in disbelief. She longed for a genuine apology, something that would show he valued her pain. Instead, he dismissed her emotions as if they were nothing. She forced a weak smile and said, I forgive you. But deep inside, her heart screamed. She wondered if forgiveness meant letting herself be trampled again and again. That day, she confided in God alone. She told herself that love was patient, love was kind, and maybe her endurance would soften Kim's heart. But with every careless apology, her soul grew weaker, and her silence became a prison. Weeks turned into months, and Kim's lifestyle grew bolder. He no longer hid his late nights, sometimes he didn't even come home until morning. Chinelo sat by the window, waiting, hoping, praying. The loneliness ate at her. She was married, yet she felt more alone than she had ever been as a single woman. Her friends noticed her fading glow. Chinelo, you're losing weight, one remarked. She laughed it off, claiming it was fasting, but deep inside she was starving for love, not food. At night, she hugged her pillow tightly, wishing it were a husband who truly cared. In her pain, she began writing in a secret journal, letters she would never send. Letters that said, Kim, I wish you would see me. I wish you would love me the way you promised on our wedding day. Each word carried the weight of a heart breaking in silence. Then came a brief season of change. One Sunday, after a fiery sermon on faithfulness, Kim seemed touched. He held Chinelo's hand and whispered, I will try to do better. For the first time in months, her heart leapt with hope. That week, he came home earlier, even shared meals with her, and spoke kindly. Chinelo's heart softened again. She began to dream that perhaps the old Kim was back, the man who once made her laugh, who once adored her. She prayed harder, thanking God for touching her husband's heart. But the glimmer was short-lived. By the following week, the late nights returned. The rudeness came back. And Chinelo realized with bitter pain that his change was nothing more than a passing mood. Hope, once again, slipped from her hands. Adding to her pain was another one she carried. She and Kim had been married for 4 years with no child. In their culture, the blame always fell on the woman. Relatives whispered behind her back, and even Kim began to use her barrenness as a weapon. One evening, in the middle of an argument, he spat the words that pierced her soul, no wonder God has not given us children. Who would want you to raise them? You can't even keep your husband satisfied. Chinelo froze, the words cutting deeper than any betrayal. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but instead, she broke down in tears. That night, she lay awake, asking God if she was cursed, if she was truly the problem. Her pillow soaked with tears became the only witness to her agony. It was on their wedding anniversary that everything seemed to shatter. Chinelo had prepared a surprise dinner, decorated the house with candles, and bought him a gift she could barely afford. She wore the dress he once said made her look like a queen. But Kim never showed up. At 2 a.m., he staggered in with another woman's perfume clinging to him. He didn't notice the candles or the untouched meal. Instead, he brushed past her and muttered, "Don't wait up for me next time." Chinelo stood frozen, the dinner she had so carefully prepared growing cold. The woman who had forgiven countless betrayals felt something inside her crack. For the first time, she whispered words she had never dared to before, "Maybe this marriage is slowly killing me." Despite her breaking heart, Chinelo kept wearing the mask of a happy wife in public. At church, she smiled and stood beside Kin like a devoted partner. During family gatherings, she laughed at jokes and served food with grace. No one suspected that her soul was quietly bleeding. But one afternoon, after a service, a young woman approached her with a sly smile. "You must be Chinelo. I've heard so much about you." Before Chinelo could ask who she was, the woman leaned closer and whispered, "Kin talks about you, but not in the way you'd like." Her knees almost buckled. She walked away quickly, pretending not to hear, but her heart was already in pieces. That night, she lay in bed, staring at her husband who slept soundly beside her, wondering how he could betray her so shamelessly and yet rest without guilt. When the pain became too much, Chinelo finally opened up to her mother. She cried over the phone, her voice breaking. "Mama, he doesn't love me anymore. He humiliates me, cheats on me, and still expects me to forgive." Her mother sighed deeply. "My daughter, marriage is not a bed of roses. Endure. Pray. Do not let the devil scatter your home." Chinelo wanted to scream, to tell her mother that endurance had become a noose around her neck. But instead, she nodded silently. She respected her mother's words, but for the first time, she wondered if this counsel was chaining her to a life of misery. After the call, she looked in the mirror and hardly recognized herself. The once vibrant woman now stared back with hollow eyes. She whispered, "Is this what marriage is meant to look like?" One evening, Chinelo stopped at a supermarket after work. As she paid for her groceries, she bumped into an old university friend, Chika. Unlike others, Chika saw right through her. "Chinelo, you don't look well. Are you okay?" Tears threatened to fall, but she forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." Chika placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to lie. I can see pain in your eyes. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." That small act of kindness shook Chinelo. For the first time in years, someone had looked beyond her mask. That night, she thought about Chika's words and realized how starved she had become for genuine care. It was a reminder that she was still human, still deserving of love, even if her husband refused to give it. Chinelo's breaking point came a week later. She found receipts for an expensive hotel stay in Kin's jacket. Confronting him felt like déjà vu, but this time she demanded answers. "Kin, how long will you keep doing this to me? Am I not your wife?" Instead of guilt, he exploded in anger. "You again. Always nagging, always complaining. If you don't like it, leave. Do you think you're the only woman who wants me?" The word struck her like a knife. For the first time, Kin openly told her to leave. No excuses, no sweet lies, just raw, unapologetic cruelty. That night, Chinelo sat on the bathroom floor, trembling. For years she had forgiven him, hoping love would conquer all. But now, she realized she had been holding on to a man who no longer even cared if she stayed. The following morning, Chinelo didn't cook his breakfast. She didn't rush to iron his clothes. She sat quietly on the couch, staring at nothing. Kin noticed the shift. "What's wrong with you?" he barked. For once, Chinelo met his eyes without fear. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." Her calmness unsettled him more than her tears ever did. In that moment, something inside her stirred, a flicker of strength she thought she had lost. She realized that endurance had kept her chained, but she still had a choice. A choice to either keep dying slowly in silence or to rise and reclaim her dignity. Though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing became clear: if Kin thought he could keep breaking her forever, he was about to be shocked. Chinelo's quiet defiance unsettled Kin, but instead of softening him, it provoked him further. He began flaunting his affairs openly. One Saturday afternoon, he drove into their compound with another woman seated beside him. Neighbors watched in shock as he walked past Chinelo without shame, holding the woman's hand. Chinelo felt her knees buckle, but she refused to cry in front of the neighbors. She stood frozen, her heart tearing apart, while whispers spread like wildfire. Later that night, she confronted him, her voice trembling. "How could you bring her to our home?" Kin sneered, "This is my house. I bring whoever I want. If you don't like it, pack your things and go." That was the night Chinelo realized she was no longer his wife in his heart, she was just a shadow he tolerated in his house. For the first time, Chinelo shared her pain with someone other than her mother. She called Chika, her university friend, and poured out everything, the cheating, the insults, the humiliation. Chika listened in silence, and when Chinelo was done, she said softly, "My dear, love is not supposed to destroy you. Forgiveness is a virtue, yes, but forgiveness without change is foolishness. You deserve better." The words hit Chinelo like a thunderclap. You deserve better. No one had ever told her that before. She had always been taught that endurance was a wife's duty. But now, she realized endurance had become her prison. That night, she lay in bed and for the first time in years, she didn't pray for Kin to change. Instead, she prayed for courage, for herself. It happened on a cold Tuesday evening. Chinelo returned home earlier than usual from work, only to hear laughter coming from her bedroom. Confused, she pushed the door open, only to find Kin in their matrimonial bed with another woman. Her heart stopped. The betrayal was no longer whispers, receipts, or perfume. It was naked, shameless, undeniable. She dropped her handbag, her breath stolen by the sight before her. Kin jumped up, angry instead of guilty. "Why didn't you knock?" he shouted, as if she were the intruder. The woman laughed mockingly, making Chinelo's humiliation complete. Something inside her broke that day, not her spirit, but the chains she had worn for too long. With trembling hands, she whispered, "Enough. This is the last time you will ever break me." Chinelo didn't sleep that night. Instead, she packed her clothes quietly, one by one, into a small suitcase. At dawn, she looked around the house one last time, the house she had tried to turn into a home, the house where her love had been trampled. Kin woke up and scoffed when he saw her packed bag. "Where do you think you're going? You'll be back. Women like you never leave." But this time, Chinelo's silence was different. It wasn't weakness, it was strength. She walked past him without a word, her head high, her tears hidden. For the first time in years, her steps felt light, even as her heart bled. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: staying would have killed her spirit. Leaving was the first breath of freedom. Months passed, and though the pain lingered, Chinelo began to rebuild her life. She rented a small apartment, started a small catering business with Chika's help, and slowly found joy in little things again. The neighbors who once pitied her now admired her courage. She was no longer Kin's wife, she was Chinelo, a woman who had survived fire and walked out stronger. One day, as she served food at an event, she overheard someone whisper, "Is that not the woman who left her cheating husband? She looks radiant now." And for the first time in a long while, she smiled from her heart. Kin, on the other hand, sank deeper into his recklessness. The women he chased never stayed, and his once proud image crumbled. But by then, Chinelo no longer cared. She had finally learned that endurance should never mean self-destruction. Her story became a lesson to others: love should never strip you of your dignity. Forgiveness has its place, but self-respect is priceless. And with every new dawn, Chinelo rose from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and free.